If you want to understand why chronic bad breath persists even after brushing 3 times a day and using every mouthwash on the market, don't look at your toothpaste. Don't look at your flossing technique. Look at what's happening deep inside the bacterial ecosystem of your mouth that no amount of scrubbing can fix. Hi, I'm Dr. Liana. I'm an emergency medicine physician and oral microbiome researcher. And what I'm about to share with you goes against everything most people have been told about oral hygiene. Here's a number that should stop you cold. Recent microbiome studies estimate that over 75% of adults suffer from chronic halitosis, and in nearly 60% of those cases, the root cause isn't poor brushing habits or gum disease. It's a completely disrupted oral microbiome where harmful sulfur-producing bacteria have taken over the terrain. That means the bad breath you're experiencing right now, the one that makes you self-conscious in conversations, that makes you reach for mints a dozen times a day, isn't a hygiene problem. It's a biological imbalance problem. And what's worse, the very products you're using to fight it, the alcohol-based mouthwashes, the antimicrobial toothpastes, they're making the imbalance worse by wiping out the protective bacteria your mouth desperately needs. In this video, I'm going to show you one specific natural resin that cultures across the Mediterranean and Middle East have used for over 2,000 years, a substance that doesn't just mask bad breath, it systematically rebuilds your oral microbiome from the ground up, eliminating the sulfur-producing bacteria while restoring the protective species that keep your mouth balanced. And you can start seeing results in as little as 7 days. Most people believe bad breath is simply a matter of food particles rotting between teeth. Brush more, floss more, use stronger mouthwash, and eventually you'll solve it. You've probably tried everything. Sugar-free gum that works for 20 minutes. Tongue scrapers that provide temporary relief. Prescription-strength antiseptic rinses that leave your mouth feeling stripped and dry. And maybe you got short-term improvements, but the bad breath always came back, sometimes worse than before. But after nearly 15 years practicing emergency medicine and studying oral microbiome disorders, I've observed something that completely contradicts that simplistic advice. The patients I see with the most persistent halitosis aren't the ones with the worst hygiene. They're often the ones who are most aggressive about oral care. They brush after every meal. They use clinical strength mouthwash twice daily. They replace their toothbrush every month. And yet their breath issues persist or even worsen. Why? Because they're fighting a biological war with the wrong weapons. Let me explain what's actually happening inside your mouth right now. Think of your oral cavity as a rainforest ecosystem, not a sterile hospital room. In a healthy mouth, you have over 700 different species of bacteria living in careful balance. Some of these bacteria are protective. They produce hydrogen peroxide that naturally suppresses harmful species. They metabolize food particles into neutral compounds. They maintain the pH balance that keeps your enamel strong and your gums healthy. But when that ecosystem gets disrupted, when the protective species get wiped out by aggressive antimicrobial products or outcompeted by pathogenic strains, the environment shifts. Harmful bacteria, particularly anaerobic species that thrive in low oxygen environments, like the back of your tongue and the crevices between your teeth, begin to dominate. These bacteria feed on protein-rich food particles and dead cells, breaking them down through a process called putrefaction. The byproducts of this breakdown are volatile sulfur compounds, primarily hydrogen sulfide and methyl mercaptan. These are the exact same compounds that give rotten eggs their smell. That's what chronic bad breath actually is. It's not leftover food. It's sulfur gas being released by bacterial colonies that have overtaken your oral microbiome. And here's what most people never hear from their dentist. Every time you use an alcohol-based mouthwash, you're creating a temporary bacterial vacuum. The antiseptic kills bacteria indiscriminately, wiping out both harmful and protective species. Your breath improves for an hour or two because the sulfur-producing bacteria are temporarily reduced. But here's the problem. Those harmful anaerobic species recolonize faster than the protective ones. They're more aggressive, more resilient, more adapted to harsh environments. So within hours, your mouth is more unbalanced than it was before you rinsed. It's like using a flamethrower to clear weeds from a garden. You kill everything, but the weeds grow back first and stronger. What you need isn't stronger antiseptics. What you need is selective pressure that suppresses harmful bacteria while actively promoting the growth of protective species. You need to rebuild the ecosystem, not sterilize it. And the one natural substance at the center of this solution, most Westerners have never even heard of it. It's called mastic gum, not the synthetic chewing gum you buy at a gas station. I'm talking about the natural resin harvested from the mastic tree, Pistacia lentiscus, which grows exclusively on the Greek island of Chios. For over 2,000 years, Mediterranean and Middle Eastern cultures have chewed this resin after meals for oral health, digestive support, and breath freshening. For most of that time, nobody could explain why it worked beyond anecdotal observation. Now we can explain it with molecular precision. Greece, particularly the island of Chios, where authentic mastic is produced, has documented lower rates of periodontal disease and halitosis compared to populations using conventional oral care products alone. Population studies tracking traditional mastic users show significantly healthier oral microbiomes with greater bacterial diversity and higher proportions of protective species. This isn't genetic. This isn't about superior dental care infrastructure. This is about a specific natural compound that modern science is only now beginning to understand. Let me walk you through the exact mechanisms that make mastic gum unlike any other approach to oral health you've tried. Mechanism 1. Selective antibacterial action through masticadienonic acid. Mastic gum contains over 80 bioactive compounds, but the most significant for oral health are a group of triterpenic acids, particularly masticadienonic acid and isomasticadienonic acid. Here's what makes these compounds remarkable. They don't kill bacteria indiscriminately, like antiseptic mouthwashes. Instead, they exhibit selective antibacterial activity, meaning they suppress pathogenic bacteria while leaving beneficial species largely unaffected. When you chew mastic gum, these triterpenic acids are released slowly and coat the entire oral cavity, including hard-to-reach areas like the crypts of your tongue and the spaces between teeth. Research from the University of Athens demonstrated that masticadienonic acid specifically inhibits the growth of Porphyromonas gingivalis, Prevotella intermedia, and Fusobacterium nucleatum, three of the primary bacteria responsible for producing volatile sulfur compounds and causing periodontal disease. But here's the critical distinction. The same concentration that suppressed these pathogenic species showed minimal effect on Streptococcus salivarius and Lactobacillus species, which are protective bacteria that help maintain oral health. Think of masticadienonic acid as a precision targeting system rather than a carpet bomb. Conventional mouthwash is like clearing an entire forest to eliminate invasive species. Mastic compounds are like a selective herbicide that only affects the invasive plants while letting native species thrive. This selective pressure gradually shifts the bacterial balance in your mouth from pathogenic dominance back to protective equilibrium. Researchers at the Department of Microbiology at the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens tested mastic gum extract on oral bacterial cultures and found that at concentrations of just 0.1 milligrams per milliliter, it reduced Porphyromonas gingivalis colony counts by 68% over 48 hours, while beneficial Streptococcus species showed less than 12% reduction. This selective action is precisely what your mouth needs to rebuild a healthy microbiome. Mechanism 2, biofilm disruption and plaque prevention through polymer formation. Bad breath doesn't come from bacteria floating freely in your saliva. It comes from bacteria living in organized communities called biofilms. These biofilms form a protective matrix that shields bacteria from your immune system, from antimicrobials, even from mechanical cleaning through brushing. The bacteria on the back of your tongue, between your teeth, along your gum line, they're living in these fortified colonies that standard oral hygiene struggles to penetrate. When you chew mastic gum, something fascinating happens at the chemical level. The resinous polymers in mastic form a thin coating on tooth surfaces and soft tissues. This coating doesn't just sit there passively. It actively interferes with bacterial adhesion, the process by which bacteria attach to surfaces and begin forming biofilms. Studies using scanning electron microscopy have shown that surfaces treated with mastic extract show dramatically reduced bacterial colonization compared to untreated controls. Think of bacterial biofilm formation, like Velcro. Bacteria have surface proteins that act like tiny hooks, and your tooth enamel and tongue surface have complementary structures that act like loops. When the hooks meet the loops, bacteria stick and start building their protective fortress. Mastic polymers essentially coat those loops with a slippery barrier. The bacterial hooks can't grab hold. Without that initial adhesion, biofilms never form properly, and existing biofilms become destabilized and easier to remove through normal salivary flow and mechanical cleaning. A study from Aristotle University of Thessaloniki examined participants who chewed mastic gum for 15 minutes after each meal for 4 weeks. Using dental plaque indices and high-resolution imaging, researchers found a 41% reduction in plaque accumulation compared to the control group that chewed no gum, and a 33% reduction compared to those chewing sugar-free conventional gum. The mastic group also showed significantly lower levels of volatile sulfur compounds in breath samples measured through gas chromatography. Mechanism 3. Anti-inflammatory effects through NF-kappa B pathway inhibition. Chronic bad breath often correlates with low-grade gingival inflammation. When your gums are inflamed, they become more permeable, bleeding more easily, and providing more protein-rich material for sulfur-producing bacteria to feed on. Inflammation also disrupts the normal pH balance in your mouth, creating a more favorable environment for pathogenic species. Mastic gum contains potent anti-inflammatory compounds that work at the cellular signaling level. The key mechanism involves inhibition of NF-kappa B, a protein complex that controls inflammatory gene expression. When your gum tissue is under stress from bacterial toxins or mechanical irritation, NF-kappa B gets activated and triggers production of inflammatory cytokines like interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha. These cytokines cause the swelling, redness, and bleeding associated with gingivitis. Multiple triterpenic acids in mastic, including oleanolic acid and ursolic acid, have been shown to directly inhibit NF-kappa B activation. Think of NF-kappa B as the fire alarm in your gum tissue. When bacteria release toxins, the alarm sounds and inflammatory responders flood the area. Mastic compounds essentially turn down the sensitivity of that alarm, preventing excessive inflammatory response while still maintaining necessary immune surveillance. This reduces gingival bleeding, tightens gum tissue, and removes the protein-rich exudate that feeds sulfur-producing bacteria. Research published by the Laboratory of Pharmacognosy at the University of Athens tested mastic oil on human gingival fibroblasts, the cells that make up gum tissue, exposed to bacterial lipopolysaccharide, a toxin that triggers inflammation. The cells treated with mastic oil showed 72% reduction in interleukin-6 production and 64% reduction in tumor necrosis factor alpha compared to untreated controls. This anti-inflammatory effect translates directly to healthier gum tissue and reduced substrate for odor-causing bacteria. Mechanism 4. Enhanced salivary flow and pH buffering through mechanical stimulation. Saliva is your mouth's natural defense system. It contains antibacterial enzymes like lysozyme and lactoferrin. It washes away food particles and bacteria. It buffers acids that would otherwise erode enamel and create favorable conditions for pathogenic bacteria. But here's the problem. Most people are living in a state of chronic mild dehydration, taking medications that reduce salivary flow or breathing through their mouth, all of which reduce saliva production and create the dry mouth environment where bad breath bacteria thrive. The physical act of chewing mastic gum for 10 to 15 minutes stimulates salivary glands through mechanical pressure and neurological signaling. This is basic physiology. When your jaw muscles contract rhythmically, they activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which controls rest and digest functions, including salivary secretion. But mastic gum provides superior stimulation compared to conventional gum because its tough, resinous texture requires sustained chewing effort. You're not just going through the motions. Your jaw is actually working. Increased saliva production has multiple downstream effects for oral health. First, it dilutes volatile sulfur compounds, reducing their concentration and perceptibility. Second, it provides natural antibacterial enzymes that suppress pathogenic bacteria. Third, it buffers the pH of your mouth back toward neutral, preventing the acidic environment that both erodes enamel and favors growth of acidophilic bacteria that contribute to decay and odor. A clinical trial from the dental school at the University of Thessaloniki measured salivary flow rates in participants chewing mastic gum for 15 minutes 3 times daily. After 2 weeks, unstimulated salivary flow increased by an average of 28%, and stimulated flow during chewing increased by 43%. Salivary pH measurements showed significant shift toward neutral, and lysozyme concentration in saliva increased by 36%, indicating enhanced antimicrobial capacity. Here is the exact protocol based on what the research tells us works. Start with authentic mastic gum from Chios, Greece. This specification is critical. The mastic tree grows in other Mediterranean regions, but the unique microclimate and soil composition of Chios produces resin with the highest concentration of bioactive compounds. Look for products labeled Chios Mastiha with protected designation of origin certification. The gum typically comes in small translucent crystals or tears, ranging from pale yellow to light green. You can find it at Mediterranean specialty stores, health food retailers, or online sources. Expect to pay between $15 and $25 for approximately 2 ounces, which will last about a month with daily use. The dosage that appears consistently in clinical studies is 1 gram of mastic gum, which equals approximately 6 to 8 small tears, or 3 to 4 larger pieces. Take this amount immediately after each main meal, ideally within 10 minutes of finishing eating. The timing matters because you want to address bacterial feeding on food particles while also stimulating saliva production during the post-meal period when oral pH drops due to dietary acids. Chew the mastic gum slowly and thoroughly for a minimum of 10 minutes, ideally extending to 15 minutes. During the first minute or two, the resin will feel hard and brittle. This is normal. As your body heat and saliva soften it, the texture will become more pliable and the characteristic pine-like flavor will intensify. Don't rush this process. The extended chewing time is necessary for adequate release of bioactive compounds and for sufficient mechanical stimulation of salivary glands. After chewing for the full duration, you have 2 options based on personal preference. You can either spit out the softened resin, which will have released most of its active compounds by this point, or you can continue chewing it intermittently for up to an hour. Traditional users in Greece often keep the gum in their mouth for extended periods. There's no evidence of harm from swallowing small amounts of mastic gum, as it's used internally for digestive purposes in traditional medicine, but most people prefer to discard it. From clinical practice, here are the 4 details that make the difference between partial results and transformative ones. First, consistency trumps intensity. Chewing mastic gum once after one meal occasionally will produce minimal benefit. The microbiome shift requires sustained selective pressure over days and weeks. Commit to the full protocol 3 times daily after breakfast, lunch, and dinner for at least 7 days to see initial improvements, and continue for 30 days to achieve stable microbiome rebalancing. Second, avoid using alcohol-based mouthwash during the rebuilding period. You're trying to create selective pressure that favors protective bacteria. If you're simultaneously nuking your entire oral ecosystem with antiseptic rinse, you're working against the mastic's selective effects. If you feel the need for additional freshness, use a simple saltwater rinse instead, which is gentle and doesn't disrupt beneficial bacteria. Third, pair mastic gum with adequate hydration. Drink at least 8 ounces of water with each meal and maintain consistent water intake throughout the day. Mastic works synergistically with healthy salivary flow. If you're dehydrated, you're limiting one of the key mechanisms through which it improves oral health. Fourth, this is non-negotiable for the mechanisms we discussed. Maintain basic oral hygiene fundamentals. Mastic gum is extraordinarily effective at rebalancing your microbiome and preventing biofilm formation, but it's not a replacement for brushing and flossing. Brush twice daily with a non-antimicrobial fluoride toothpaste. Floss at least once daily to remove food particles from interdental spaces. And consider using a tongue scraper in the morning to remove the overnight bacterial accumulation before it gets distributed throughout your mouth. Here are the mistakes that will undermine your results. First, buying low-quality or adulterated mastic. The market contains products labeled as mastic gum that are actually blends of cheaper resins or synthetic substitutes. These products won't deliver the therapeutic compounds you need. Always verify protected designation of origin certification and purchase from reputable sources. Second, insufficient chewing duration. 5 minutes isn't enough. The bioactive compounds release gradually, and salivary stimulation requires sustained mechanical effort. Set a timer if necessary to ensure you're reaching the full 10 to 15-minute window. Third, stopping too soon because of initial texture challenges. Many people try mastic gum once, find the initial hard texture unpleasant, and never try again. Push through the first few sessions. Your mouth will adapt to the texture, and the flavor will become more agreeable as you associate it with the fresh feeling it produces. Fourth, continuing to use products that disrupt oral microbiome during the rebuilding period. This includes not just alcohol mouthwashes, but also antimicrobial toothpastes containing triclosan or other broad-spectrum agents, excessive use of whitening products that can be harsh on oral tissues, and smoking or tobacco use, which dramatically disrupts oral bacterial balance and creates chronic inflammation. Let's lock in everything we covered. Chronic bad breath isn't a hygiene failure. It's a microbiome imbalance where sulfur-producing bacteria have overtaken protective species. Conventional approaches using aggressive antimicrobials make the problem worse by killing beneficial bacteria that keep your oral ecosystem balanced. Mastic gum from Kios, Greece provides a completely different solution through 4 distinct mechanisms. First, selective antibacterial action from triterpenic acids like masticadienonic acid that suppress pathogenic bacteria while preserving beneficial species, gradually shifting your oral microbiome back to healthy balance. Second, biofilm disruption through polymer formation that prevents bacterial adhesion and destabilizes existing plaque colonies. Third, anti-inflammatory effects through NF-kappa B inhibition that reduce gingival inflammation and remove the protein-rich environment that feeds odor-causing bacteria. Fourth, enhanced salivary flow from mechanical stimulation that increases your mouth's natural antibacterial defenses and pH buffering capacity. The protocol is straightforward. 1 gram of authentic Kios mastic gum, chewed for 10 to 15 minutes after each main meal, 3 times daily, for a minimum of 7 days for initial results and 30 days for stable microbiome transformation. Support the protocol with adequate hydration, basic oral hygiene fundamentals, and avoidance of antimicrobial products that disrupt bacterial balance. Your oral health is not predetermined by genetics or luck. The bacterial ecosystem in your mouth is dynamic, constantly shifting based on the environmental pressures you create through diet, oral care products, and behaviors. Right now, you have pathogenic bacteria producing sulfur compounds because the environment in your mouth favors their growth. You have the power to change that environment starting today. These protective bacterial species exist in your mouth right now. They're being outcompeted by more aggressive pathogenic strains because the conditions don't support their growth. Mastic gum shifts those conditions. It creates selective pressure that favors the species you want while suppressing the species causing your symptoms. The research isn't ambiguous. The mechanisms are well documented. The results are measurable. Within 7 days of consistent use, most people notice significant reduction in bad breath, particularly morning breath, which is the most challenging to address. Within 30 days, the microbiome shift becomes stable, and you'll notice fresher breath that lasts throughout the day without constant intervention, reduced gum bleeding and inflammation, cleaner feeling teeth with less plaque accumulation, and often improvements in overall oral comfort and taste perception. This is not theoretical. This is measured in controlled studies and observed in clinical practice. I need you to do two things. First, if this information was useful to you, share this video with someone you care about who's been struggling with chronic bad breath or oral health issues. These evidence-based solutions don't reach people through advertising or pharmaceutical marketing. They spread through people like you, sharing knowledge that actually works. Second, subscribe to this channel and give this video a like. It genuinely helps this content reach more people who are looking for real science-based health information rather than just product marketing disguised as advice. I see messages from people who've watched multiple videos and didn't realize they weren't subscribed. Could you double-check right now? It takes 2 seconds, and it helps build a community of people who want to take control of their health through understanding biology rather than just following trends. Check out my previous video where I break down the specific morning drink that doubles stem cell circulation and activates your body's natural repair systems in ways that most people never hear about from their doctors. In my next video, I'm covering the gut-brain connection and one specific fermented food that reduces anxiety and improves cognitive performance through mechanisms that modern neuroscience is only beginning to understand. Dr. Liana out.